Shalom and welcome to another in our series of podcasts from Temple Beth Am, a dynamic center for conservative Judaism in Los Angeles. This is a recording of Rabbi Adam Kligfeld's weekly Rashi study class.
Hello to anyone who is listening via the Temple Beth Am podcast. We are back in the anticipation or the beginning of the description of the ninth plague. There's some really complicated and language-based Rashis coming up. I hope you'll find them satisfying. I do, but there's a lot of work to get to the satisfying part. And it all has to do with the Torah's interesting way of describing the ninth plague. We read the verse that introduced the ninth plague last week, but we didn't do the Rashi. Let me read the verse again. It's chapter 10 of the book of Shemot, Exodus, verse 21. And Joel, can you close that window? I love hearing freshman students, but not what we're trying to teach.
Rabbi, your volume's low.
And the Torah says, Vayomer Adonai el Moshe. God said to Moses, Netei yadcha al hashamayim, stretch out your hand upon the heavens. Vihi choshech al eretz Mitzrayim, and there will be. So this is kind of a probably there was choshech, darkness on the land of Egypt. Good morning, Rick. Yamesh choshech, and something, and then another verb about choshech. So we know that there's going to be darkness, and not only will there be darkness, there will be whatever Vayamesh choshech means. And we started to describe it last week. We know that it's some intensifying way of describing darkness, right? Whatever it is, it's more than. It's harder than the absence of light. What did Renee just said? The volume is low. Is this better, Renee? If I bring it, okay, that's better. Okay, sorry about that. It's hard to just get the mic at the exact right spot without getting the book in the way. Okay, hold on. It's a good question. No one really knows. We're gonna read at least three different interpretations of what the word actually means, right? So without giving away the punchline, we don't know, because mem vav shin and mem shin shin mean different things, and it's not an obvious verb to describe it, particularly since we've already been told in the verse that there's going to be darkness. So whatever vayamesh choshech means, it's more than v'yehi choshech. V'yehi choshech is there will be darkness, and it's if the Torah is saying. So you might think to yourself, I understand. There's going to be darkness, no light. It's not just v'yehi choshech. It's v'yamesh choshech. But what it means, that's what we're going to try to figure out through Rashi, and we'll look at some translations. Rick? Yeah, we could look there too, yeah. Yeah. Well, the problem is we don't know what root this is. Right? So this is a puzzle, because it's not even just what does the root mean, it's just from what root is this verb built, right? So that's where we stopped. Let's did we compare translations of the verse last week? I don't remember. Let me compare a few translations, and I'll share the screen. Shemot chapter 10, this verse 21, right? Yeah. Okay. So I'll share the screen. Make it a bit bigger. Okay, so translations. So Everett Fox translates it as, God said to Moshe, it's on the screen there, stretch out your hand toward the heavens and let there be darkness, that's vihi, verb to be, over the land of Egypt, so that they will feel darkness. It's a very interesting translation by Everett Fox, because usually tries very hard to correlate like colloquial language that we would make sense of, that is as honest as possible to the forms of the verb. There's no they will. There's no plural verb in this, right? And what does the star say here? They, the Egyptians, right? So he is conjuring a plurality in the verb that doesn't exist. And to answer Joel's question, Everett Fox, is reading this as related to the verb that means to palpitate, to touch something, right? Mashash. And we'll look at Rashi, we'll bring that up as well. Maybe it's one of the super commentaries from Rashi. That's Everett Fox. Koren translates it as that there may be darkness over the land of Mitzrayim, darkness which may be felt. So, Koren is using the same root, but being a little bit more conscientious about the verb form. That it doesn't seem like a they; it's a singular subject, as if the subject of the vayamesh is the choshech, and it's almost like a passive, like a darkness which could be felt. Okay, 1 second. JPS. There may be darkness upon the land of Egypt, a darkness that can be touched, very similar to Koren. And then let's look just at the Charles Kahana. And there will be darkness over the land of Egypt, and the darkness will eclipse all things. Wow. I mean, he's trying to help us understand just how profound this darkness is, and he's being less literal to the word, and apparently this is connected to the commentary of the Barbanel. Rosemary, let's give Rosemary a microphone. And I assume, Larry, you're not in a place where you can share any of your interesting translations, right? You're on the way to go serve justice, correct?
Well, it's almost the one you read, but this doesn't have any. It says even darkness, which may be felt.
Even darkness, which may be felt, right? So every attempt at translation is trying to figure out why the Torah added Vayamesh Choshech to a phrase which already made it clear that it was going to be darkness, right? Barry?
Well, normal darkness, we think of lack of light, the lack of sun, but this is a different darkness. This is a darkness that's being created. It's a creation of darkness. It's not the lack of light.
Yeah, so we'll see how Rashi plays with that a little bit, and he's going to give us several different possibilities. This is a long, interesting Rashi. So does anyone want to volunteer for it? Renee, are you volunteering for it? Or is your hand up for a different reason?
No, I'll do it. Vayamash. That
Hold
one?
on 1 second, Renee. Can someone increase the volume on the computer over there so we can hear Renee better? And or Renee, speak a little bit louder. Because
Okay.
we want to be able to hear you in the room.
Vayamash choshech, v'yachshich aleim choshech yoter machshko shel laila.
Okay, so see if you can translate that a little bit.
And darkness became darker, and darkness by day became darker than the darkness of a normal night.
Something like that, right? The first thing Rashi does is he renders vayamech choshech into another verb phrase, which was vayachshich alehem. So in our phrase vayamech choshech, choshech is a noun, darkness. The verb is vayamesh. Rashi says, kind of throw the darkness into the verb. That not only will there be choshech, we had that, be choshech, but vayachshich alehem, the darkness will continue to darken, right? It's a little bit, I don't know, it's like adding not that much, but he's trying to figure out how do you add to darkness, right? If it's dark, how do you add to darkness? Well, the darkness is gonna darken upon them. Choshech yoter mechoshko shalayla, a darkness which is more dark than the darkness of night. Right? So think of the darkest night you know. No stars, no moon, no ambient light, right? Darker than that, right? Whatever that is, it's going to get more dark even than that. Keep reading Choshech Shalayla.
Shalayla, Yamish, v'choshich od. So it's going to get even darker than even that.
Of the night, Ya'amish will continue vayachshich od, and will continue to darken, right? And there's a sub-commentary on Rashi. It says, Tokvo shel hachoshech, the strength, the power of the darkness, hayashaveh bayom balayla, was equally dark in the day and the night, which meant that not only was it dark during the day, but it was darker at night than it normally is during the night, even on the darkest night, right? They could not make a distinction between day and night. Why that's an interesting addition is that it's adding utter confusion and confoundment to just the absence of light. right? And it's almost as if we're being told it's an absence of light that could not be improved by lighting a candle, right? That no matter what time of day it was just darkness, and it didn't matter if it was day or night. And reader, you cannot imagine how dark it was. Okay, that's the first thing that Rashi says. Any questions or comments on that? Tova, let's get Tova mic. And speak directly into it. And then I see your hand, Larry.
Right. This is making me think of two things. One is just the closest experience I've ever had to this is being in a deep cave when they turn the lights out. I mean, it is factually absence of light, but it feels different. There's you can almost feel it pressing on your face.
Yes.
It's such an absence. But
it's palpable.
Palpable, exactly. But the other thing that this makes me think of is, I mean, this metaphor has been used a lot with regard to the plagues as a whole, but here, this kind of reversal of creation, this is the undoing of
Very
light.
Good.
And that, the darkness that's brought is that darkness where there never was light.
That's a great comment. The first thing we know about what God can do in the world is to make a distinction between light and dark. And God is undistinguishing between light and dark here. That's excellent. Right?
It's actually a double thing, because God makes a distinction, but then he also later makes the moon and the star and the other lights. So it's beyond the absence of those lights.
Very good.
That
I see Larry's hand and I see Rick's hand, and then I want to make a comment, and then we'll keep going with the Rashi.
I'm sorry that I'm unable to give you the other translations. I'm driving back to the courtroom.
Hold on.
I had a couple of.
One second. Can someone? There's got to be a way to make this sound louder over there. Joel, do you want to take a look? What's that? All right. All right. Keep going, Larry.
All right. I had a couple of comments. One is, I can't remember the Hebrew word for senses, like the five senses, and whether that helps at all. But my feeling is that this is basically like a sensory deprivation experience, where it's not only the darkness, which is what you perceive with your eyes, but all the senses were deprived. The Egyptians are being deprived of any senses whatsoever: hearing, touch, smell, or taste. And God is taking all of that away from them. And that actually, I think, plays into what Tova said about God's creating the act of creation is creating light first, and now he's taking away all of creation for them.
Yes, and Rashi later on is going to speak a little bit in that direction in terms of what other abilities were impeded by this particular darkness, and all of this is very clearly saying it is just massively, incomprehensibly different than just not being able to see.
And just one more thing,
the Torah wouldn't have needed to add another phrase to Vihi Chosha.
And just like Tova talked about her experience in the cave, and I think I've mentioned it before in another context, the experience of being in a complete sandstorm, which completely blocks out the sun, and you feel completely different than you do at night. So it's not the same sensation of just being at night.
Good. Rick, and then I want to make two comments.
Just to remind us that Ra was the sun god, and it's an attack on the sun god, and everybody faced east in the morning, thinking that the sun would come up, and if it doesn't, it's going to throw everything off, and just going to.
I think it's also part of the pattern of the plagues representing.
Or speak it to the mic.
I think it's also a pattern of the plagues representing a complete undoing of creation. So, which we touched on when you talked about light and dark. And it's also interesting, it wasn't that he imposed a temporary blindness on all these people, which surely he could have done.
Correct.
I remember very clearly that the night before my stepmother's funeral, my father basically went blind. And luckily, I knew an ophthalmologist who was set up to examine at home, and she had us come over. She examined my dad, said it's just a microbe. She prescribed an antibiotic, And we went and had the prescription filled, and within a half an hour, he started to get his sight back. And it frankly seemed rather miraculous to me, both that he'd lost his sight at that fraught time and that she'd been able to diagnose and repair it so quickly. But God could have done a temporary blindness on these people, but instead he has this darkness, this ending of light and dark.
Good. It's not a plague on the people. It's a plague on the earth, right? And we've gone many times in this discussion to how to think of this as the second undoing of creation, right? The first undoing of creation is the flood, right? And this is, in response to abject sinfulness. And this is the second, more drawn out undoing of creation, also in response to abject sinfulness. Two things that this evokes for me, one silly and one very serious. The silly one, if you want to hear 90 seconds of really good comedy that relates to this indirectly, you have the name Brian Regan, Regan, an extremely clean, funny, they call him the comics comic. Like comics listen to him about how to create a joke and delivery. Brian Regan. Google for yourself Brian Regan black coffee and hear him trying to describe something blacker, a coffee blacker than you could possibly imagine, and you'll be thinking of this verse when you get there, but it's really very well done. The serious thing, some of you know the name William Styron, who is the author of Sophie's Choice. He wrote a terribly impact-rich monograph called Darkness Visible about his descent into profound, unrelenting depression. He went through an excruciating depression, right? The kind of depression that if you've been sad for a week, you still have no idea what this is like. And to me, it was very helpful as a human being and as a pastor to actually have it be described to me the difference between being low, which is not a good feeling to have, and being profoundly clinically depressed. And he names it darkness visible, right? Which is a wonderful, awful way of thinking about it, because the whole point of darkness is that it creates invisibility. But this was a visible, palpable, it's not just a deprivation of the sight, it's that none of your senses work. And people who are depressed and they feel bleak and all they experience is darkness, it's not just that they can't smile, it's that none of their senses are working in a way that we just take for granted, thank God, those of us who are well enough to not be in that deep, deep, deep pit. If you're curious, by the way, about what his experience of depression was, to make you a more empathic person to someone who goes through it, it's an awful but quick read. I think it's like 70 or 80 pages. And the title is evocative of this. All right, so that's part of the way through the Rashi. Let's keep going. We're going to get Rashi's first guess as to the shoresh, the root of this, right? So far, he answered the first part without telling you why he thinks the word vayamesh means that. He just told you what he thinks it means, but not why it means that in the word. So, Renee.
Vayamesh, kmo vayamesh, mesh.
Okay, so he quotes again vayamesh, and he says, it's like the verb vayamesh. Anyone who knows what root is vayamesh? What's the three-letter root? Emesh. What does emesh mean? Last night, right? Interesting. Hebrew has a single word to describe not just yesterday, but last night, just like it has a word for the day after tomorrow and the day before yesterday, right? It's considered very formal Hebrew, poetic Hebrew. You wouldn't say with your friends like Ma'asitem emesh, what did you do last night? People would laugh at you. But that's what the word means. And what it means, and the reason why it means last night is because at the core it means the pit of darkness, right? The most intense darkness, the most intense last darkness that you just experienced was last night, right? So originally it didn't mean last night. It just meant profound darkness. It became the meaning of Yamesh. So what's the problem? What's the grammatical or linguistic or shoresh-based problem of saying that the word Vayamesh, the way we have it written in the Torah, is from Vayeamesh? No aleph, right? So we can't just, sometimes the rabbis do that. Al tikra this, ella that, right? I know it says this, but pretend it says that. So Rashi is not that glib. He's not saying, yeah, I know it's not the root, but let's read it that anyway. He's going to try to convince us that it really could be that root, even though in the root, emesh, the aleph is central to the word. In fact, I forgot to bring up BDB on Emesh, so let me just do that. I want you to see what he says the word actually means. 1 second. Okay, so nice, Joel. Da, 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 da. Da, 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 da. Anyone? Da, da. I'm having a hard time. Hold on.
It's dark.
Come on. Sorry, everyone. It'll be worth it when I get to it. Okay. So here's BDB on the screen of Emesh. It's translated as a noun and as an adverb meaning yesterday. It's connected to Assyrian musu, which means night, Arabic amsun, which means last night, and then darkness, the gloom, the mother of all the ruined, right? So it has to do with the deep dark of last night, and that's all he says about it. Okay, so with that in mind, keep reading, Renee. So he says it's like the word vayamesh. Go ahead.
יש לנו תיבות הרבה חסרות א'.
Translate that.
There's a lot of words in scripture that doesn't have a aleph.
Right, which means there are a lot of words that should have an aleph that don't. The absence of an aleph does not mean the word is not built from a root that has an aleph. And he's going to give us, Rashi well enough, he's going to give us some examples, but he gives you a little bit of his theory as to why, which is really interesting.
לפי שאין ארבעת האלף נקראת כל כך.
Keret kol kach. What does that mean? Lefi she'ein havarat aleph. You know what havara means?
So because of the pronunciation of the aleph is not obvious.
Recognize so much. Havara means pronunciation or syllable, right? He says, let's be honest. Do we really know what an aleph sounds like? Right? When you were taught in Hebrew, you were taught that the aleph sounds like what? The vowel. That there is no sound to the aleph. And so he's basically saying, since there is no sound to an aleph, he's not, what's that? Right. Like, does it have to be there? Maybe it doesn't have to be there, right? He's not being playfully saying that it could be the case that the aleph, its presence or its absence is not as critical as any other consonant because we don't even pronounce it, right? So since the pronunciation or the syllable of the aleph is not recognized so much, ein
הכתוב מקפיד על הסרונה.
Therefore, the katuv, meaning is
what's written, is not leaving it out.
Is not makpid. You know what makpid means? It's not so focused
particularly,
on, so concerned about, so punctilious about, right? What's that?
Particularly.
Fussy. Very good. Fussy is exactly right. It's not so fussy when it's gone, right? The Torah doesn't leave out a dalid. If a dalid has to be there, it has to be there. The Torah doesn't leave out a lamed. All right, the Torah leaves out an aleph, big deal, right? You're pronouncing it the same way. He's almost saying that. And the text, therefore, is not particular fussy when it is not there. And now he starts to give us some examples. Kimo.
כגון ולא יכל שם ערבי.
Okay, so I'm going to share the screen a bunch of the times. So this is from the 13th chapter of Isaiah. It's part of a prophecy of doom against the Babylonians, that the doom is going to be so great that all these things that were considered normal, right, in that part of the world are all of a sudden not going to be happening the way they normally are. And we have this verse in the 13th chapter of Isaiah, chapter 20. Lo teshev lanetzach, your land will never be settled again. Velo tishkon ador vador, no one's going to live in it. Tishkon shochein, generation to generation. You're going to be so destroyed, so anti what this land is used to. Lo yahel sham aravi, no Arab will yahel there. Pause for a second. Biroim lo yarbitzu sham, and shepherds will not make their flocks lie down there. So whatever is happening in the second half of the verse, it's an undoing of the norm. So what do shepherds normally do? They make their flocks lie down. What do Arabs normally do that could be lo yahel? You see it there in the English. What's missing? The aleph of ohel. In Hebrew, to pitch a tent is a verb. Tent, right? And so you would expect it to say lo ya'ahel or lo ya'ahil with an aleph. It's not there. It's obvious, Rashi says that's what it means. Okay, the aleph is not there. Big deal. Okay. Keep reading. Kamo.
Kamo lo ya'achel lo it'ah yateh ahalo.
Okay, pause. So meaning when the verse says lo yahel without an aleph, it's as if it's saying lo ya'ahel, that the native Arabs will not tent, or lo yiteh ohalo, will not pitch their tent. Everyone knows that's what the verse means. No one looks at that verse and says, hey, where's my aleph? Everyone says, all right, the aleph isn't there. We're not so makpid about it. Another example. Okay, so this is from the second book of Samuel, chapter 22. It's on the screen. This is part of David's song of... What's that? It's the same word, yeah. After being... God spared him from the enemy. And what he says in verse 40 is, Vatazreni chayil lamilchama. You tazrenid chayil with strength lamilchama for battle. Tachria kamai tacheni. You brought low, you made bow down kamai, those who came up against me, tachteni, in front of me. Right? And what is the root of a tazreni? It's not there's no implied I in there, which would be that you helped me. The root is the root which means to gird, right? To wrap. And we know this from Psalm 30, which some of us said just a few minutes ago, at the end of Psalm 30, which is the beginning of Psukei de Zimra. Look what King David says there. Hafachta mispadi, you turned my mourning limacholi, into a dancing. Pitachta saki, you undid my sackcloth, my garb of mourning. Vatazreni, with an aleph. Vatazreni simcha, and you girded me with joy. Clearly, King David knows how to write the verb gird with an aleph. All right, but in the book of Samuel, King David is also singing. All right, the aleph is there. It's clear what it means. At least to Rashi, these are proof texts to show that sometimes the aleph is not there, even though it's clear that the aleph is implied in the verb. And then Rashi just says two more words, kamo v'tazreni, just like the word that I just brought to you from chapter 30 of the book of Psalms. I see you. Don't shake. It's distracting. Raise your hand and I'll put on you. Yes.
Can't hear him.
Just on the poetry of it, I see the alephs in verse 39, Achalem and Em Chatzem, and in 41, we've got Atzmi Tame, but there's no alephs in the middle. The Vatazreni matches to Tachteni.
Yeah.
It rhymes nicely and all that.
Yeah. Yeah. And why, I mean, you could ask Rashi, like, okay, so why does the aleph sometimes fall out? I think he would say, I don't know. Sometimes it does. But that aleph that's missing in Tazreni and was missing in Vayehel is also missing in our verse, and therefore it should be V'ye'amesh choshech, that the darkness last nighted itself, but even during the day. I see someone's hand, and then Joel, hold on, Diane's hand.
So I've been sitting here thinking I want to offer a completely different read on Yamesh Choshech. So I think we said early on that Yamesh is the same root as Mamash, right?
Could be. It's one of the possibilities.
So it could be read as to make real the darkness. So this darkness is of a different sort than darkness that we've seen. So and God created this alternative darkness, which in the next verse Moshe then puts into play.
Yes, I think that's one of the possible reads, right? So we have at least 4 possible reads of just what the root means. There's Aleph Mem Shin, darkness like last night. There's there's the one that you're suggesting that is from Mamash, real. There's also a suggestion that it's not from Mem Mem Shin, but Mem Shin Shin, Mashash, which we'll look at a second. And there's also a possibility that it's from Mem Vav Shin, and we'll get to all of those. It's a wonderful puzzle. We don't know how to resolve it. No matter what we think we will know about this verse at the end of class today, we will not have resolved it completely because there's no way of knowing, which is what's fun about it on some level. Okay, let's go back to the Rashi. Now he goes to Onkelos. Okay. Before he goes to Onkelos, let's read the Onkelos. Should I put it on the screen? Does everybody have the Onkelos in front of them? Okay. Hopefully, if you don't, I can put it on the screen. Onkelos, I'm going to read the whole verse in Onkelos from verse 21. V'amar Adonai l'Moshe, that's pretty easy. God said to Moses, Arim yadach, lift up your hand, right? Arim, like Camp Ramah, a high place. Al tzeit shemaya, forgot exactly what tzeit means in Aramaic, but towards the heavens. V'yahi chashocha, and it will be darkness. That's the same Hebrew root. Al ara, on the land, the Mitzrayim of Egypt. Batar diyedei kevel laila. After, batar is after. Diyedei, which means removed. Kavel here, I'll show you what it means in Onkelos, in Jastro. 1 second.
Receive?
Well, that's one of the possibilities of what it means, but in Aramaic, you'll see kavel means to be thick, to be misty, to be dark, or foggy, or dark, or obscure. So it's not related to the root kabel, to receive, even though it's the same letters. So Onkelos says that what does Vayamesh Choshech mean? That there will be darkness, Vahava Choshech, Kavel, Batar Dyede Kavel Laila. After the anticipated darkness of night has been removed, there won't be light, there will be dark. So instead of nighttime waning, that wonderful moment if you happen to be awake, right, and you just begin to see the darkness yielding to light, instead of that, this is how Onkelos reads the verse, it'll go in the opposite direction. Just when you expect natural darkness to yield to light, that's when a different sort of darkness will come over you. Okay, that's how he translates the verse. So now, what does Rashi do on that? But Onkelos, to your game.
Game lashon chasara mush kamo lo yamish.
Kamolo Yamush. Okay, so Rashi says that when Onkelos translates it, he translated it from a root meaning to remove, hasara, kamo lo yamush. We have that many times in the Torah, in the Bible, and this particular verse that Rashi is quoting is from the book of Joshua. I'm going to share the screen. Right? Look, this is Joshua's exhortation to the people. Lo yamush sefer haTorah hazeh mipicha. May this book of Torah never be removed from your mouth. V'higita bo yomam b'layla. You should speak of it day and night. Lamanti shmor v'lasot, in order to observe and to keep kachol hakatuv bo, everything written in it. Ki az tatzlich et arkecha. Therefore, it's going to make your path successful. Ba'az taskil, you'll be wise. So Rashi says that Onkelos says that our verse has nothing to do with touching or palpable or last night. It simply means remove. It's the unexpected reinforcement of the darkness right when you are expecting the darkness to be removed. Normal nighttime darkness is gone. now we've got a different Vayamesh Choshech, like right when the darkness is being removed. But Rashi says that there is a problem internal to Onkelus's grammatical logic. So Rashi then quotes the verse, Batar Diya
קבל לילה,
Sheyagia,
כשיגיע סמוך לאור היום, just before
when
the
we
light of
get
day.
close to the light of the day,
אבל אין הדיבור מיושב על חוויו של,
Havav, that's the word Vav.
חוויו של וימש.
Okay, so Rashi says, I see you, Onkelos. Makes, it's a good try that it could be from the word mush to remove, but it doesn't really make sense grammatically. The next few lines of Rashi are going to be very hard to unpack. I'll do the best I can, assuming even I understand it. But Ein Hadibor, what Onkelos is trying to say does not make sense with respect to the vav of the verb bayamesh. And why?
לפי שהוא כתוב אחר ויהיה חושך.
Because it's written after the phrase, and there was darkness, it can't mean that there was darkness, and then you're saying, Onkelos, that now darkness is coming after the darkness was beginning to yield. There's a super commentary in Rashi that says that Onkelos's translation would have made more sense had you had a word kasher in there, like when, as if the verse said that there will be darkness when the darkness is being removed. But since there's no kasher there, the vav of Vayamesh Choshech doesn't do, Onkelos, what you think he's trying to do. Is Rashi correct there? I don't know, but he's interestingly giving air to Onkelos's reading to give us, the reader, a sense that, it's evocative that it could be related to the word yamush, to remove. It doesn't make sense, but then he resolves it one more way. Midrash Agada.
מדרש אגדה פותרו, לשון ממש בצהריים.
Okay, so we have a Midrash Agada, potro. What does poter mean?
To get rid of.
I think it means more like to solve, right? When Pharaoh was having the dreams and the Ein Pitrono, and there was no one to solve it for him, we've got a Midrash which solves it with a tet. Renee, poter means to get rid of or to fire. With a taf, it means to solve.
So is this like pitoron?
Correct. Solution. And he says, this is the language of v'hayita mimashesh batzoharayim. Remember I said that some people read this as mamash, mem shin, and some people read it as mem shin, right? What's that reference? Let's pull it up. Anyone have a automatic association? This is from
Deuteronomy.
Parshat Ki Tavo. This is the second set of the curses that are described to the Israelites as to what's going to happen if they don't follow God's command in the land of Israel. So chapter 28 of Dvarim, verse 29, we're going to read it in a few weeks. Vehayita, you're going to be so cursed that you are going to be mimashesh. Sorry, I made the mistake. Mimashesh batzoharayim. You're going to be feeling about at noontime. Kasher yimashesh ha'aver ba'afela, like a blind person, pitifully, like feels around as if that person is in deep darkness, even if it's light. The lo tatzliach et darkecha, you will not find your way, which is interesting, by the way. Just noticed that's the language from the last chapter that Rashi quoted of Joshua, when that was trying to understand Onkelos's use of the word, understanding the word yamush. And you're going to be feeling around like blind people. La'ita achashuk v'gazul, you're going to be withheld and robbed all the ways. So in this verse, mashesh means to feel, right? It means to search around. So Rashi says that there's a Midrash Agadah that says that our verb in our verse is not about last night, emesh. It's not about removal, Onkelos. It's about feeling around. Keep going. Shahaya. Renee?
עד שהיה בו ממש.
Go back a few words. Shaya kaful.
שהיה כפול ומכופל ואב Ad shaya bo mamash.
Okay, so
So it doubled and redoubled and doubled again until
right, it's going to be doubled and redoubled. And av means thick. Ad shaya bo mamash. Rashi is sort of suggesting that mem shin shin and mem shin are kind of the same thing. He's conflating mashash and mamash. Maybe he's actually correct etymologically, and that even though he's quoting a verse from Dvarim that's about mashash, to feel around, he's saying it's going to be mamash, something real, physical, palpable, touchable, doubled, quadrupled, octupled, right? Whatever darkness you thought you were, add to it many more times. Again, that's the Brian Regan quote. Okay, yes, Rick.
If I can, no, don't read the screen. The afelah there, notice?
Yeah, you got to keep the mic at your mouth so they can't hear you.
The afelah in the verse there.
Yeah.
The next verse coming up, verse 22, we have choshech afelah.
Correct. Yeah, that because afelah, and Rashi is going to make reference to that in his comment to the next verse, is another Hebrew word for a type of darkness, a gloom.
Is there a connection to any kind of emotional darkness that people feel?
I mean, I don't know. I mean, it depends on what you mean by the question, right? Should we, in our minds, try to imagine emotional darkness to try to understand what was plaguing the Egyptians during this plague? Sure, because we speak in that language. Is that the language that the Torah spoke? I'm not sure. I think the Torah is speaking about something, just a catastrophic, physical, onerous darkness that was, again, much, much, much different than just no light. Right? And a darkness that couldn't be resolved by lighting a candle. Rosemary, give her the microphone.
I can refer to a personal experience, as it is my daughter's yahrzeit. When we went to the synagogue that night, we entered the synagogue. It was Sephardic temple. The entire synagogue was light.
Rosemary, speak a little louder, please.
There was so much light and warmth. And the entire time that we were praying, I was saying, that's Friday night prayer. I was saying, it's amazing how it is light here. And when we went to when we drove home, the accident happened. Even in the car, which we had plenty of blood and death, still I had that light. And that was what it was keeping me standing. It was keeping me going on. And I went after the accident many times to the synagogue. The lights were on, but that's not the same light that I saw. And it wasn't the same warmth. So we can go from this light to the darkness, which I experienced once. I don't know. Maybe I was sad. Maybe I was depressed or what. I don't know. But I know it was half a second or maybe 1/10 of the second. I just felt there was nothing in the world. And suddenly God disappeared from my mind. There was a darkness. It scared me. And I said, why am I alive? What is there if there's no God? And I think that's what they are talking. If you experience that darkness and that light, you will know even if you're in darkness. And I think like in French history, Jeanne d'Arc or many other saints who have been burned and killed, they were singing. They were not crying, many of them, because they were in light. So I think the darkness and light, that's the moment God is absent. And when on creation, he separates dark and light because he's present. And I think in this moment in Egypt, he just went away. 1 second, even if he's here, you can't feel it, but he's here and the light is with you. So that darkness is very heavy.
Today is your yahrzeit, Rosemary? Some people who experience depression describe it as the sun is there because the sun is always there, but the clouds are so thick that it's not even imaginable that they'll be parted and that the sun will blaze through. That it's a perpetual emotional cloudiness. And it doesn't matter that the sun is there. You can know intellectually that behind the clouds of the sun, but if you can't see and experience the sun, what benefit is it to you? Right? It's a thick, heavy, palpable darkness. Rebecca, there's one right in front of you.
I was just thinking of Onkelus's translation and of the regular darkness, and then now this more intense darkness. And it made me think of maybe the regular darkness is like a dark navy blue, and how sometimes in a clothing store, there's something and you're not quite sure, is that navy blue or is that black? And you grab something black and you put it next to it. Oh, okay, that is navy. So the two together. So maybe then the intense darkness of the plague is the black next to it. And it's not until you kind of have one sequentially after the other, you compare and contrast them, that you see, oh, this is really a lot darker than what that was.
Good. Clothing store or me most mornings in my closet and not knowing until I come out if I put on black pants or navy pants. What's today? I think today's black. Very good. Joel. Mike. Take it off the stand. It's easier. By the way, 10 years from now, we'll get used to this. We'll figure out how to do that. It's not coming off. There we go.
Were you comparing this with the locusts?
No.
Okay, because you could also say, well, you thought the locust was made everything dark. I'll show you real dark.
Yeah, very good. Yes, Bernie, take the microphone, Bernie, and speak right into it.
I just think the darkness had to be the worst plague. It seemed to me. I mean, a lot of things are bad, but that really made it difficult.
Well, if we think of the plagues as a crescendo, right? It's the last thing before death. It's the last thing before annihilation. Yeah. Okay. Well done, Renee. Complicated Rashi. He's not done with the Choshech because we got Choshech in the next verse too. But we need to read the next verse before we read the Rashi next verse. Leonard, microphone.
So just wanted to point out that Mem Shin Shin, if you put it into the Hefil, you get Yamesh. So
the second shin falls out.
The second shin falls out. And Mem Vav Shin is just a secondary form of Mem Shin Shin, according to Klein. And then
Mem Vav Shin, even the version of it that means to remove, is related to Mem Shin Shin, to touch. I believe you. It just doesn't make sense to me.
No, there's two different Mem Vav Shins.
Aha.
But hold on one second. I'll look it up for you.
I'll find it in BDB because Rick had asked for it and I forgot.
The first one is to depart or remove, and the second one is
under the Mem Vav Shin.
Mem Vav Shin is a secondary form of Mem Shin Shin. And then lastly, okay, I just hit my screen and I don't see it anymore, but Rashi's, let me find it here. Rashi's, what verse are we on? Okay, so the sentence over here where he says that the Vav, because it comes after Vayikra Choshech, it doesn't make sense. That whole sentence makes no sense to me at all.
Rashi's sentence saying that Onkelos makes no sense to you?
Well, I mean, I don't understand the reasoning there, but here's my thought, which is I'm sure not what Rashi intended, but the word that we're trying to figure out is Vayamesh, Vav, Yud, Mem, Shin. And the word that we're comparing it to is Yamish, Yamush. Yamush, which is the same letters, just in a different order. So, if he had said that, it would make more sense.
I'll let him know. BDB on Mush is very similar to what Klein says. So it's on the screen now. So the first entry of just Mush is to leave its place, to remove, something about to walk with elegant, proud, self-conceited gait. I'm not sure what that's related to, but really where my cursor is, it means to depart, right? But the next one is to feel, that it's as exactly as Klein said, the secondary form of mashash. From Parshat Toldot, to Yitzchak feeling Esau, right? Okay. let's read verse 22. Oh, wow, it's almost the class almost over. Look at that. And then we'll get to the Rashi next time, or at least we'll get through the Rashi next time. Joel, do you want to read verse 22?
ויט משה את ידו על השמיים, ויהי חושך אפלה בכל ארץ מצרים 3 ימים.
And before you translate, a reminder that everything we just discussed in the previous verse is just God saying what's going to happen. Nothing's happened yet. Now it's happening. Okay?
And Moshe raised his hands to the heavens, and there was a foggy darkness along across the entire land of Mitzrayim for 3 days.
Good. And internal to the logic of the flow from 21 to 22, assuming it makes perfect sense, it seems that the two phrases in 21, V'yehi choshech and Vayamesh choshech, gets turned into one phrase in verse 22, choshech afela. Right? So it's as if the phrase choshech afela, which is hyphenated, it's one word. It's two words, but it's one word. There's only one trup on it. Vayehi choshech afela seems to be the acting out of the prediction. It was not just Vayehi choshech. That would have been just the first half of the previous verse. But there's going to be a deep darkness, the kind of darkness you haven't experienced before, right? That is the rendering in the actual act of what is predicted. This introduction of the word afela. Okay? Anything else in the verse that jumps out at people as worthy of comment or question itself? Barry? Oh, you going to say something?
I was just going to say this is the first time that Moshe does it without his rod or without any. Is
that true?
Well, I've been keeping track. Yeah.
Okay.
He either does the rod or he does the soot thing.
Okay.
And this is also the first time where there's actually an end date.
Aha. We're told the amount of time. Okay.
Again, this is not a process of darkening. It's a creation. Darkness. This total darkness is created.
Yes, total. It's a total. Something is being made. The thing that's being made is the darkness. Any other hands on this? Okay. Let's begin. We have 5 minutes. Let's begin the Rashi on Vayehi choshech afela 3 yamim.
וגומר 3 ימים, חושך של אופל.
Ophel. So Ophel is a masculine noun form of the root afela, right? So Rashi's saying what seems self-evident, that it's that basically, I think what he's unpacking is the grammar of choshech afela, right? If you're wondering how those two words relate to each other, it's basically smichut. It's a choshech of, what type of choshech is it? It's an ophel choshech. And he assumes that we know what ophel means, some kind of deep, profound darkness. Okay?
שהיה כפול ומכופל.
You went up rather than went down.
Oh, sorry.
שלא ראו.
שלא ראו איש את אחיו אותן 3 ימים.
Okay, so what does it mean? What does it mean that it was a choshech shel ophel? That what?
That a person could not see the person next to him, his brother, for 3 days.
Now, peek ahead to verse 22. Rashi is assuming we already know what's coming. We'll read verse 22. Sorry, verse 23. We'll read verse 23 closer and get there. But the first words of verse 23 are lo ra'u ish et achiv, that one person could not see another person, which seems to be a reference to what kind of darkness? Darkness, right? Like when the Torah says, describing this, that it was dark, so people couldn't see each other. That sort of seems like normal darkness, that you can't. Yeah, of course you can't see people if it's dark. Okay, keep going.
ועוד 3 ימים אחרים חושך מכופל על זה. שלא קמו איש מתחתיו.
Okay.
And another 3 days, the darkness was doubled upon it, and so much so that man
couldn't get off their tuchases.
Yeah,
something like that, right? Lo kamu ish mitachtav. Literally, they could not get up from their tachat. Right? They couldn't move. They were paralyzed. I want to explain to you the technical thing Rashi is doing here before we understand like the message. The technical thing he's doing here is that in our verse, there's a reference to choshech afilah for 3 days. In the next verse, two things are described. And again, we'll look at that verse slower. One is that people couldn't see each other. And then that people couldn't get up from where they were, shloshet yamim. You might think, Rashi says, that was all 1 3-day period. There was 3 days where people couldn't see each other, and they also couldn't get up for one another. The 3 days where people couldn't see each other, that's called choshech. But choshech afilah was the second 3 days, when it got doubled, when it was the type of darkness that paralyzed people. It's not just they couldn't see. That's called nighttime. It's the darkness that disallowed them from moving. And even though the Torah doesn't say explicitly another 3 days, it just uses the word 3 days twice. Rashi wants to understand this as 2 different 3-day periods, with the second one being the version of it that made it extraordinarily harsh, as opposed to just 3 perpetual days of darkness. Keep reading. Yeah, Yoshev.
They sat and couldn't stand. Ve'omed ein yachol leshev, and those who were standing couldn't sit.
Right, and the Rashi is saying that so that you don't think that the phrase "shelo kamu ish mitachtav" only literally means they couldn't get up when they were sitting. It's a phrase meaning they couldn't move at all. Right? You could say, so the people who were sitting couldn't get up, but people who were not sitting were not impacted by that? No. It was a type of thick darkness that prevented any kind of movement, physical, or going back to what Renee said, emotional. And I keep going back here because it's the only analog I can think of, right? If you have ever been depressed or you know someone who has, they can't move.
They don't want to get out of bed.
They don't want to get out of bed. And it's not just that they're tired. It's like their limbs are not responding. There's a blockage, a deep, profound existential blockage that if you've never felt it, it's a billion times worse than feeling lethargic one morning. Right? Let's pause here. We're in the middle of the Rashi. The next place Rashi goes is tries to explain to you, going back a little bit to what Bernie said, why is this plague here? Like, why this plague now? And he gives a fantastical reason, which you may find to be, too much of a stretch, but too bad. When do you leave? We see you again? Okay, so we'll see you next week. Have a good Wednesday, everybody. Kol Tuv, Rosh Chodesh Tov, Happy Elul. Be well.
You have been listening to another in our series of podcasts from Temple Beth Am, a dynamic center for conservative Judaism in Los Angeles. If you enjoy these podcasts, we invite you to write a review on the Apple Podcast site or wherever you get your podcasts. For more information about Temple Beth Am Los Angeles, go to tbala.org.